went to bat for her when they tried to kick her out of school, and you know, they're incredible.
This is the Thunder Channel on Nootropics, on Testosterone, and on Male Performance. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell to get notified of all future content. I've really been appreciating your guys' likes, so please, it doesn't take long. Just hit the like button if you're watching this video. To support us, look, we've got high-level, cutting-edge nootropic stacks at livecortex.com. That is the Torque stack and the Cortex stack. You can find a bunch of digital guides on nootropics and testosterone all at our website in the description of this video. Okay, so we are back for another episode of Smart Drugs or Not, and we're going to analyze Jeff Bezos in this one. Now, this is an interesting topic of discussion because this is a guy who's built, obviously, a multi-billion-dollar business, started very small, and is certainly different now in terms of how he physically looks. Some suggest that he's on TRT, and how he cognitively functions. So I'm going to run through some interviews of Bezos, and I want to get an understanding of kind of what I think he's taking, what he's taken over the years to sort of progress into his position of having all of this responsibility and continuing to have to grow Amazon. So let's just get right into it. And what we're going to be looking for is his mannerisms, his verbal fluency, his general cognition. How is he functioning? Let's see if we can determine what smart drugs he may or may not be on.
Instead of on your competitors. And so where I sometimes see companies and even young, small startup companies, entrepreneurs go awry, is they start to pay more attention to their competition than they do to their customers. And I think that in big, mature industries, that might be a winning approach in some cases, kind of close following. Let other people be the pioneers and and go down the blind alleys. There's many things that a new inventive company tries won't work. And so those mistakes and errors and failures do cost real money. And so maybe in a mature industry where growth rates are slow and change is very slow. But as you see in the world more and more, there aren't very many mature industries. Change is happening everywhere. You know, we see it in the automobile industry with self-driving cars, but you could go right down the line of every industry and you would see it.
Okay, so right off the bat, I want to say definitely the discussion of Bezos being on TRT or otherwise enhanced hormonally seems to be true. I mean, if you look back, and I actually do have a video, this is somewhere around the 1990s, and as you can see, like, look at his posture. I mean, he's sort of slouched over. He doesn't really look like a muscular guy, like a guy with good posture. He actually looks sort of like a nerd. Like, he just looks like he's got like he's sitting there at 400 or 500 nanograms per deciliter total T. And he is ultimately just a computer geek. Whereas if you look at his physique here, I mean, it's generally a completely different guy. I mean, maybe he's got male pattern baldness and that's why he's bald, but also it could be excessive levels of DHT caused by high levels of testosterone. And now he is absolutely bald, but he just looks a lot more muscular. Like, he's an in shape dude. Have you ever seen like pictures of Bezos? I'll flash one in front of the screen. He's a pretty sizable dude, right? Definitely older. I'm not exactly sure how old he is right now, but for being that old, he's in great shape. Now, looking at the dynamics of how he's communicating, one thing that I did notice is that he takes a little time to think about what he's about to say next. And he's not very verbally fluent. He's got a little stutters, little uhs, little ands, and he doesn't talk particularly fast. Now, that really wouldn't lead me to believe that he's dosing, classical smart drugs. Like, I wouldn't think that he'd be dosing aniracetam or oxiracetam or any of the cholinergic mediating nootropics, which do enhance verbal fluency via general brain optimization, as well as like enhancing episodic memory, a very critical kind of brain mode for verbal fluency. So as far as racetams and cholinergics go, I can't really look at his behavior and his mannerisms and as well as like how he's verbally fluent in talking and say that he's taking any of that stuff.
Being a pregnant teenager in high school was not cool in Albuquerque, New Mexico at that time. And so it was difficult for her. My grandfather went to bat for her when they tried to kick her out of school, and they're incredible. So the gift I had is I had this incredible family.
Could you describe a little bit the role of your grandfather?
Now, what it looks like to me is that, again, as we talked about on the Smart Drugs or Not with Elon Musk, when you see people whose eyes are perpetually open and they just don't blink a whole lot, that means there's energy behind their eyes, right? So Bezos is one of those guys that though he'll blink, his eyes are pretty wide open. If you look at him when he talks, especially his left eye, I'm not sure if that's some sort of defect or something, tends to be open. Like his eyes are actually open. There's energy behind his eyes. In addition to that, he seems very relaxed. This is another thing about some of these higher level CEOs, and I'm not sure what it is they're doing, but Bezos seems to be a relaxed guy. He's not overstimulated. He doesn't appear as if like has any degree of anxiety going on. He's just very chill, very relaxed, seemingly personable. So my first impressions in looking at Bezos and kind of listening to him talk and watching his mannerisms is I think there is a stimulant in the mix. I mean, 99% of people that you're going to see out there on the street are drinking coffee, right? So there's some stimulant there. Because again, there's this sort of energy behind the eyes thing, right? I can always tell how somebody feels by looking at their eyes. How quick are their eyes moving? Do they stay sort of perpetually open? Is there energy behind a person's eyes? And with Bezos, you can definitely tell that the dude has energy. Now, we don't actually know. I mean, he could be drinking 5-hour energy for all we know. We really don't actually know what the hell the cocktail is, but I would wager there's something there that is giving him energy and some sort of stimulation. But at the same time, it could also be said that in addition to a stimulant, he's taking some sort of balancer as well. A lot of these guys, they've got to get up and do, broadcasts like this. Bezos is on the BBC. He is being interviewed by CNN. He's being interviewed by Dave Rubenstein all over the web, right? So when you're doing these interviews that are going to get 500, 600,000 views or more, or if you have an audience, you want to relax. Like, giving public speeches and stuff is not necessarily like easy to do. It's totally nerve-wracking. So I would wager when he goes and gives some of these speeches, he may rely on some sort of pharmacological cocktail that enhances GABAergic or serotonergic signaling, just tones things down a little bit, but not too much. Doesn't seem sedated, doesn't seem like he's sort of droopy or slurring or any of that kind of crap. So I think he's got a good balance in whatever pharmacological cocktail he's taking. Now, I don't know if you can recognize this, but when you see people move in somewhat of an erratic way, like you just like watch his head movement, like that sort of stuff, and his arms, like, I mean, cool. So maybe a charismatic, like energized person would do that, but the speed with which sometimes he makes those quick movements right there lends me more to believe, yes, there is some sort of stimulant in the mix and it's not just coffee. Because when you get stimulated past a certain point, but even if you have a balancer in the mix, like there are quick movements that you make because essentially your brain is working at a faster pace than usual, right? So you just look a little odd. I'm going to switch to a different interview of him just so I can confirm that there's some sort of like stimulant that's a little too potent. Again, maybe a balancer as well, but something is making him move in a way which is kind of weird. So let's check this video out here.
Just like that. And what we saw is there was tremendous waste of effort between our applications engineers and our networking engineers, the ones who run the data centers. And they were having to have lots of meetings and planning fleet sizes and all these like non-value added tasks. And we said, look, what we can do is develop a set of hardened APIs that allow these two groups, the applications engineers and the networking engineers, to have roadmap meetings instead of these fine-grained meetings.
Okay, I don't know if you can tell, but in this particular interview, he is way more verbally fluent than the other interview. So keep that in mind as we watch just another like 30 seconds of this.
And then we'll expose those APIs to the applications engineers, and they can just take as much compute resources they want. And as soon as we hatched that plan, it became immediately obvious to us. We were just going to do that for ourselves. And as soon as we did that, it was immediately obvious that every company in the world was going to want this.
Now, this is the Economic Club of Washington, D.C., right? And so this got 1.7 million views. So perhaps Bezos knew that he needed to be a little more optimized in this particular interview compared to the last interview. He's more verbally fluent here. I don't know what it is, but I would wager, okay? I would wager it's more methylxanthine class. So perhaps caffeine, perhaps theobromine, perhaps teocrine, or perhaps something equivalent on the pharmaceutical side, the energy drink side. Like, I mean, the guy may be drinking 5-hour energy, which has tyrosine, citicoline, taurine, and some other stimulants in it, right? So there's definitely a stimulant component in this one, but which is also making him function better. And I kind of go back to 5-hour energy, honestly, because I don't think a guy like Bezos is taking cholinergics. I don't know that he's like, oh, nootropics, and maybe I should get down into that granular level. I think that if he's taking something like 5-hour energy, it actually does have citicoline in it. So you've got some optimization of the cholinergic pathways. And you've got the energy component to it too, which lends itself to enhancing verbal fluency. And he is a lot more verbally fluent in that particular video. Let's just watch another bit of it and see if we can figure out if he's still on the GABAergic that is calming him down. Because this is a completely different Jeff Bezos from the last video. Let's check it out.
Then a business miracle happened. This never happens. This is like the greatest piece of business luck in the history of business so far as I know. We faced no like-minded competition for 7 years. It's unbelievable. And I'll give you, when I launched Amazon.com in 1995, Barnes & Noble launched BarnesandNoble.com in 1997. 2 years. That's very typical if you invent something new. We launched Kindle. Barnes & Noble launched Nook 2 years later. We launched Echo. Google launched Google Home 2 years later. When you pioneer, if you're lucky, you get a 2-year head start. Nobody gets a 7-year head start.
All right, so what's my final assessment? Again, so in that second video, he was way more verbally fluent and energized and not relaxed at all, right? You could just tell by his mannerisms and stuff. Like, he wasn't in that kind of contemplative, sort of taking his time to say, his next words. He's just like straight up stimulated and in a great place. So I would wager in the second video, definitely a stimulant, but not a balancer. No GABAergic. And again, with these guys, you're probably looking at pharmaceutical GABAergics like benzos on the low dose side. Whereas in the first video, I can tell that there was a stimulant in the mix, may have just been coffee, could have been Adderall or modafinil, right? But at the same time, there was definitely some sort of exerted attempt to reduce extra stimulation or reduce anxiety, right? He was a lot more relaxed in that first video. Again, these guys are getting up and talking in front of what may be 1,000 people at the moment, but what's eventually going to be 1.7, 1.8, 2.4 million people on the web. So they're nervous about that, right? And it's not far-fetched with people at the highest level to not get into the trenches of nootropics, like, oh, let me take some lemon balm and inhibit GABA T, and so I make a little more GABA as it accumulates because I'm not breaking down a lot of GABA. That's one good strategy, right? Instead, they're going to shoot for the pharmaceutical benzo. So I can almost guarantee there's either Xanax or an equal compound in there in that first interview where he's kind of chill. He's sort of like more reflective. And in the second video, either modafinil, Adderall, 5-hour energy, certainly some sort of stimulant above caffeine, but no balancer. Now, before we end the video, I want to take us to a video from Derek from NPMD where he actually touches on this, right? It's called, let me see if I can bring the actual title in front of you guys. Yeah, look. Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk are on TRT. Natter you're not, speculation goes mainstream. So let's look at this little clip so we can kind of bring back the notion that, yeah, in addition to some potential nootropics and GABAergics, I would wager Bezos is on hormone replacement therapy. Let's check this. Let's see what Derek has to say.
Is our elite business culture being driven by testosterone supplementation? Read one of the more bespoke theses we have published here. It's very, it's written in a way that is, very professional sounding, but essentially it's just a fucking natty or not on Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos. So we're going to go through it together. There's a natural hormone-mediated life cycle to a businessman's career. When he's young, he goes for broke and often goes broke. He borrows big, fights hard, and doesn't take no for an answer, and builds up an empire. Now, obviously, you probably seen, or maybe you fucking haven't, I don't know. If you've seen my video recently on testosterone makes effort feel good, where it was responding to Lex Friedman and Huberman from the guest he had on the show, who's also a very, I'm realizing a very prominent spokesman in, or I don't know, he's not an influencer, he's like an actual high quality fucking professor, and he knows this shit inside out pretty much in terms of neurological health and whatnot, and he has some good information on hormones and whatnot too. Changes we're less likely to think about after all.
So basically Derek is just reading this article written about Bezos and Musk and whether or not they're on tier T, but it makes an interesting point. The point is, yeah, as a guy gets older, I mean, you have a prime for a reason, right? It's usually, in your 30s, and then it peaks at 38, 39, if you're natural, right? And if you're not doing anything to optimize testosterone or brain performance, and then kind of things slowly decline. But these guys, I mean, look, they're running multi-billion-dollar companies. There's no question that they're optimized at some capacity. There isn't a question, my friends. And I Elon, hard to say about TRT, doesn't really look like the shape. He got a little bigger over the years, so potentially. But Bezos, definitely. Okay, there's hormone replacement therapy. I don't care how you try to cut it or how you try to justify it. Or the guy suddenly started lifting weights. No way. He is optimized definitely. You know, my final assessment is on some interviews, he's definitely more sped up and verbally fluent. There's no question about that. So there's stimulants in the mix, and in that case, there's probably stimulants without any balancers. But in other interviews, Bezos is definitely slowed down to an extent which makes me believe, like, he's very relaxed, and you can actually tell. You know, in his mannerisms and how he's speaking and how he's able to just sort of relax himself. He sits and is more contemplative and kind of reflective on what he's saying. So that's always indicative to me that someone is either profoundly relaxed naturally, which is really hard to do, or they're on some sort of pharmaceutical GABAergic or otherwise GABAergic. So I think it's a mix between the two. I think there's potentially some modafinil in the mix, potentially some Adderall in the mix, potentially some Xanax in the mix, potentially some 5-hour energy and or otherwise methylxanthines in the mix. But I don't think that it's as deep as nootropics. I don't think they're dosing racetams and or I don't think Bezos went up and, you know, took 10 milligrams of Noopep with some alpha GPC before his videos. I think, again, at the highest level, these guys are just going for the lowest hanging fruit and trusting, you know, perhaps a personal doctor who's saying, hey, you know what, let's get you on some Vyvanse for this one, and let's potentially bring in a very low dose of something like Xanax. Right now, guys, yesterday just launched the entire podcast between me and Vigorous Steve, where we talked about nootropics, we talked about hormone optimization, we talked about dialing in your TRT protocol, we talked a lot about TRT, but we also talked about Steve's experience with uridine, Steve's experience with cerebrolysin, Steve's experience with Cmax and other peptides. It is explosive. It's very long and it's highly information dense. So you can check it out on this channel. It was literally the last video that launched before this. So go check it out and go sub to Steve's channel, because not only is he into hormones, bodybuilding, and that whole side of things like steroids, but he is also an avid nootropics user. As I said in the beginning, look, we've got action-packed, really highly effective, cutting-edge nootropic products and testosterone optimization options at livecortex.com. First, the Torque Stack. I mean, this stuff is exceptionally powerful. You couldn't really buy a more balanced but epically stimulating nootropic stack that will not fail you, right? It's just 6 to 8 hours of clean energy when you take it. It's very predictable. That's what I built it for. Think of a 16-year vet in nootropics building a nootropic stack for the masses. That is what I did with Torque. When you take a couple capsules of this stuff, you're going to notice in 15 to 20 minutes, your brain turns right on. And you can buy it literally now in the description of this video. Don't wait. Go get a bottle. This stuff is amazing. Our other stack, Cortex, is a uridine-centered stack that the research on uridine and acetylcholine points very clearly to neurogenesis. If you want to grow new neurons and actually feel good and have that dopamine stimulating effect, go buy Cortex. This stuff is very strong, and you can buy it in the description of this video. Again, another one of my stacks. If you need to book me for consultations, it's one of the major things that I do. I spend a good degree of my day helping men to get their hormones back on track, giving advice on TRT or blood work or dialing in protocols, getting nootropic regimens that are targeted for people's brains, fixing energy problems, fixing sexual dysfunction. I got a bunch of different areas of expertise. You can check all that stuff out at livecortex.com, and you can book me in under a minute, and usually we're on the phone or back and forth via email in under 24 hours. If you liked the video, please like it. If you disliked it, totally dislike it, fine. Comment for the algorithm. Let's let YouTube know that we're putting out quality information here. Appreciate you being with me, and I will talk to you guys on the next one.